Hello, my name is James Sullivan, and I'm your host here on Pioneer Valley Life. We're in the studios of Easthampton's eMedia. We're in the Eastworks building. If you're ever in the neighborhood, stop in and see the studio. You might want to do your own program someday. My guest today is Caroline Ruderman.
Hello.
Who's in Northampton.
Yep.
She has a Reiki practice. She's an expert in Reiki, I guess I could say that. And you've recently, so welcome to the show, number one.
Thank you.
And you've made some recent changes to your business of how you're, getting the word of Reiki out there and doing stuff like that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that change?
Yeah. So for probably about the last 12 years or so, I've been working one-to-one with people. I've had an office downtown. If anyone's, ever looked up Reiki Northampton, my website's probably been very present in the downtown area. So I've been really teaching. I don't call myself a Reiki expert per se because I try to encourage people to be an expert on themselves. I really love the process of teaching people how to not trust external sources, but to kind of go within, and that helps with a lot of clear decision making. That helps with, really like building trust with ourselves, because there's so many times where we've been undermined as children from our internal knowing, as young adults when we're trying to explore who we are in this world. And so sometimes coming back to that inner truth is really empowering, is really important for people. But the self-knowledge is really is what I guide people to bring back to themselves. So I don't really like to think of myself as a Reiki expert because that's an external authority in a way, right? So for many years I've been teaching in person, and now I'm fully virtual. So I'm really reaching people wherever they are, which feels very, very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll have no more walk-in practice. It'll all be virtual, so that anybody around the world could really see it, sign up and see it. Yeah.
Anybody around the world, yeah. And so, even right now, I have, when I had my one-on-one clients, I would have people, flying in from California, driving in from New York State. I have students in Taiwan. So there's been an element of people coming to me for a long time, and now I just feel like I'm kind of reaching a broader audience.
Right. So you're describe Reiki.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Yeah. So it's going to feel a little bit different for everybody. It's often thought of, or I'll kind of start with like the book definition of it, and then I'll talk about it in terms of how I experience it. So one of the things that is the translation, so Reiki as a healing art started in Japan, made its way from Japan around World War II to Hawaii, and then it kind of spread throughout the US, and it's all over the world now. One of the ways that it's translated from Japanese to English is this universal life force energy. So it's really this, it's this greater energy that we have all around us. I think of it sometimes as, the wind is an earth energy, is a life force energy, the thing that makes plants grow, the thing that makes the trees do their thing, right? So some of that, of course, is their internal mechanisms, their biology. And also there's an essence. There's an essence between when a tree is alive and when a tree doesn't have that thing growing anymore, right? We see that if you see a live mouse and a dead mouse. Like there's something that like an animating force. Some people call that a soul or a spirit. Use whatever words you want to use, right? So when we're talking about Reiki, there's this very larger idea of conscious universal life force energy. So at any point, we can learn Reiki and we can learn how to channel this energy through us. So everybody kind of has their own key, their own energy. But there's also larger networks that we can tap into. And Reiki is one of them, is among them.
So you say Reiki, with the K-I, I think you said ki. Is that similar to some of the other ones, say chi is the energy that's moving around?
Yeah.
So is that similar?
Absolutely. So these are very general words to describe energy. Ki comes from, Ki comes from Japanese,
Yep.
and chi comes from Chinese
Yep.
lineages, the word. So, so they're very, and prana is another very general word for energy. So, or shakti. So
Yep.
these are all very general words for energy.
So Reiki is just one way of working with that energy?
Exactly. It's the healing art, the type of practice that we call Reiki, which includes the Reiki symbols, the Reiki history, the 5 Reiki precepts, some of the way it's taught from teacher to student. That is sort of all wrapped up in the energy itself, as well as how it's taught from teacher to student, kind of the book style learning of it as well.
So is Reiki a hands-on thing?
It can be.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't have to be.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I work on my cats, sometimes they give me the dirty look, like like no. But if I'm on the other side of the couch, I can feel them receiving
Yeah.
Reiki,
Yeah.
but they might not always want the hands-on touch.
Yeah.
Which is great because there's plenty of times where we don't always have the availability to touch. Sometimes people don't want to be touched. Like I know so many people that are like, I do not like to be hugged.
Yeah.
Or if you have somebody who is on the spectrum and touch is actually very sensitive.
I've heard that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a million reasons, right? There's an emergency situation. Like if paramedics are with somebody, you're not going to get in there touching, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of, if somebody's in surgery, like that's not a space that you get to go.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons that touch isn't always available to us. Sometimes we don't want to touch somebody else.
Right.
Sometimes they're just very far away. So touch is available, of course, by consent of the person and the situation as well.
Right,
so we
right.
have kind of natural limitations around
Yeah,
that, but it can be done with or without. We call it, you can be doing it touch, or you can do it what we call like remote Reiki or distance Reiki.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I imagine if you're moving to an all virtual environment, there won't be too much touch going on there.
There won't be as much touch, that's true. I do have some of my students are local, so I do meet with some people in person who are geographically in proximity. But part of the beauty of connecting with another person, whether it's just conversation or heart to heart, is that we have the availability to really feel who they are.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I took a little bit of a look at your website, and there seem to be a couple different levels of programs that you're offering.
Yeah.
Could you describe those?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about the traditional way that people teach Reiki, and then I can talk a little bit about how I'm offering it now. So the traditional way of how it's organized is there's Reiki level 1, there's level 2, and then there's level 3. So, and a lot of times people kind of are like, oh, I'm a Reiki master, I'm a level 3, and what that really means is that person might have taken 3 individual weekend workshops. So I tend not to really like the word master, because it just has it's a little bit of like a misnomer in our in the context of our language. So I always think of Reiki level 3 is about teaching Reiki. And it's people who've learned Reiki level 3 doesn't necessarily mean that they want to go on teaching, but the level 3 kind of means that you have the skills and the availability to pass on the attunements, which are kind of the practice of getting to know Reiki more deeply within yourself. So it's often taught in level 1, level 2, and level 3, and sometimes level 1 and level 2 are combined. Sometimes level 1, 2, and 3 are combined. There are about 1,200 lineages of Reiki, so there's a lot of different ways that people offer it. So I just want to forecast there's no wrong way. There's no wrong way. There's no standard way either.
Okay.
There's so much variation in how that information is passed from teacher to student.
Right. How did you first get interested in Reiki?
I got interested in Reiki because I had really bad anxiety. And I had, the classic panic attacks. I was, drinking and then, having a lot of caffeine and really just, I don't know, it was just a really difficult time in my life. And, I was smoking a lot of weed and I was in that space where I just was numbing myself. And I don't think at the time I probably would have admitted that's how I was using those substances, but it was always my stress relief. And I was into yoga and meditation, so I kind of had a lot of healthy practices as well, and then I had a lot of numbing practices as well. And I was at a point when I was living in a really small town. I was living in a town called Hudson, New York. And I didn't have a car. I had just moved out of New York City, and I was living upstate. I ended up taking a full-time job at a local store, a local retail shop, and it was probably the most stressful job I'd ever had in my life. And you wouldn't think it would be such a stressful job, but it was a really intense work environment. And so during that time, I was drinking a lot of beer, and I was just barely getting out of bed, so I was having even more caffeine, and I was really burning myself out. I could feel how my nervous system was just on fire. And during that time, I really, I was just looking for anything. The yoga, I would go to yoga, and it would feel good for like a couple of hours, and then it would accumulate all over again. So one night I was flipping through my phone, and I was just seeing who I hadn't called in a while, and I had met this Reiki teacher about 5 years prior, and I just really liked her whole vibe was just so cool. Her name is Nana Delaplanque. She's still teaching and practicing in Brooklyn. And I just thought she was so cool. She was this little French lady. She was a painter. She was very short, had short curly hair. She was just so cool. And I was flipping through my phone, and her number just literally jumped out at me. And I was like, oh, I wonder what Nana Delaplanque is up to. I looked her up online. I saw that she was offering a weekend Reiki level 1 course that upcoming weekend. And there was just my heart started beating, and I got really excited, and something felt very special. So I signed up for the course. I switched with a coworker. I signed up for the course, and I went down to New York for the weekend. And during that, so it was a pretty small group. I think there was maybe 4 of us learning in that particular class. And so every person got a chance over the weekend to be the demo person, to receive Reiki on the table. Mind you, I'd never had Reiki before. I'd never really heard of it other than my first introduction with Nana Delaplanque all these years ago. So I was just so excited to try it for myself for the first time. And so I was the last person to go. And basically she was doing the hand positions. She was doing a demonstration of the hand positions on my head, neck, and shoulders. And it was maybe, I don't know how long it was maybe 20 minutes. It was a very short session. I laid down, fully clothed on the table, laid down on the Reiki table. And I remember there were several things that happened. Like one, I actually kind of felt a little nauseous. I was like, ooh, I could feel my body processing something. And then the next thing I really noticed is that it was over very quickly. If you were just gonna lay down and stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes, you'd be with your thoughts probably for a while. But it was over so quickly. And when I sat up, when you strike a match and the top of the head of the match is on fire, and when you blow it out, it's still smoking. That's what my head felt like. I felt like she had just extinguished all of the fire on my head.
Wow.
It was just really impactful. And I just felt like it was the first time in probably a couple of years, at least a couple of years, that I felt like I was myself again. I just felt so calm. I felt so centered. And then, you know, the weekend kind of wrapped up and I went home and I was just like, oh, this is so good. I went back to my very stressful job that Monday and my boss started berating me about, I don't know, curtains or something. And I accidentally quit. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And she sent me home with a week's pay and these prophetic words. She slapped me on the back and said, maybe the next time I see you, you'll be doing this Reiki thing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I went home totally in shock because I never quit a job so unexpectedly. And the next day I went home and I cleaned my whole apartment and like rearranged all the furniture. I was like, what's going on? And, you know, from going to a very relaxed state and having, you know, what I perceived as safety and a steady full-time job, having that kind of like yanked out of me, you know, just really the external change happened so rapidly. And so I called my Reiki teacher the next day and she said, well, now that you have all this free time on your hands, why don't you just start doing $20 Reiki sessions? And it took a while to grow my business from there, to actually like grow a business.
Wow.
And
so you went right into offering it yourself.
I went right into it.
Yeah.
I went right into it. I was just like, I just loved how I felt. I loved feeling so good, and it was just like, oh, how can I do this for myself more? How can I do this for other people? And a lot of really deep healing came from every time I would get centered, because the Reiki is at its heart is meant to be a daily practice. It's meant to offer you a space where you can feel safe, where you can keep coming back to your heart, where you can kind of keep coming back to your inner knowing. And so there is really trusting ourselves. And so that was something that I was just like, oh my God, give me more. And I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. Partly, I mean, truly the beginning of it was a little selfish. I was just like, I want to feel this good all the time.
Oh yeah.
And the thought of going for another job was just like, why? Like, so I took a lot of side jobs as I was, you know, growing my practice early. I would be a pet sitter, but I'd call myself a Reiki pet sitter. So I was like, you know, you might be going away, I might be house sitting, but I'm going to be doing so much Reiki with your animals. So, you know, it was a lot of like kind of gig stuff early on. But that it was just like my sights were set on like, I'm going to make this work. And then when I started teaching, I was like, oh, this is the love within the love. You know? Okay,
great.
Yeah.
So how did you get from Hudson, New York to Northampton, Massachusetts?
I was sitting in meditation one night. So I went to school out here. I lived out here for a while.
Okay.
And I was sitting in meditation one night, and clear as day, I heard words in my mind that said, in the next 6 months, move back to Northampton. And I said, no. I said, no. And then, because I was building a business, I had friends, I, you know, was dating people, like, you know, I was like rooting into this little community. And the thought of picking up and moving again, I was just like, no.
Right.
And so I settled into the idea. A couple weeks went by and I started settling into that idea. And kind of slowly I started telling people that, you know, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about moving, I'm thinking about relocating. One of my close friends like lives out here. So as soon as I told him that I was thinking about moving back, he was like, you know, beyond excited. But it took a little while, so I got a very clear message. I got a very clear insight, and then I resisted it. But you know, I ended up moving back here because I got that very clear message. I, you know, was in those spaces of being calm and centered, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm listening.
Yeah, so the message got through.
The message got through.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Yeah. No, and that's, you know, that's the way some things happen in life. I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I've had similar experiences where, you know, something just appears and, you know, you go, oh, okay. And, you know, but it is hard to do. It's, you know, picking up and leaving and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so how long have you been here in Northampton now? You said 12 years for your practice, or longer?
12 years for my full practice, but I think I've been here for about 9 years now. And it makes sense living here again. Why I chose to build into Northampton. There's a huge healing arts community, like huge. I had no idea when I moved back that this was so deeply rooted, not just massage therapy, but just the whole range. People are doing Mayan abdominal massage. There's tons of doulas and midwives. There is just, there's float tanks, and I mean, there's just a huge variety of energy workers and you name it, shamanic practitioners, herbalists. I can't forget my herbalist friends out there. In addition to all the local farming and all the kind of people who really care about where food comes from, and people that love hiking and conservation. Like, this is really like a very deeply connected area to to the healing arts, to connecting with the earth. And so into wellness in general. So it makes a lot of sense why I landed back in this area.
No, because there's a magazine that you can get locally. Is it Many Hands or something? And you open that up and you see the unbelievable amount of practices advertised of all kinds. Some you never would have heard of in a million years and thought, who would do that? But there just happens to be. They wouldn't be here in this area if there weren't people who could take advantage of their practice. So they stay here because of the fact that, it's got a lot of good things about it, Pioneer Valley Life that we talk about all the time, but one of the things, branching out from your Reiki practice, just talking about healing arts in general, as you just mentioned. There's a lot of it here.
So much.
And it's if you don't like that, try that. If you don't like that, try that. And maybe that will give you the message. Will come through and you'll go, oh, that's what I have to do to be what I want to be. So that's interesting to have that option just by picking a place to live. Because sometimes you're stuck at a place to live because you happen to get a job there, and it might not be a good area to live in. There may be no community feel, there may be nothing, but I think we're lucky here. And the fact that, the university and the other colleges are nearby, you've got a lot going on in this area. And, so you're still here because you were successful in your practice, but I mean, you're also successful in your own life.
Well, I mean, successful, what does that even mean, right? But I think that one of the things that I have observed in my own practices is that I've always just had a mindset of like, I do what I want. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a youngest child. I don't know. Maybe I'm Sagittarius. I don't know. But I think that there's a lot of times people get into the mindset of like, well, this is my only option. This is my only option, and I'm dealing with the cards that I'm dealt. Right. There's kind of there's decisions that are being made based on what my there's decisions that I have to make based on my limited options. And that's real for a lot of people.
Oh, definitely.
That is very real for a lot of people. And also, there's a lot of reasons why that's not true. There's a lot of reasons why when we get really calm and centered within ourselves, that we can start hearing and receiving information that helps us be more in tune with what we're looking for. With who we are. And sometimes it's a little tweak that makes a huge difference. It doesn't always have to mean that you quit your job and move different cities. I just kind of go big or go home sometimes. But sometimes it's a little tweak. So there's things in our lives that that can be really dramatically shifted. And for me, the practice of Reiki is the thing that always kind of keeps me coming home to myself, and it keeps me in this place where I'm listening, not just to my spirit guides or the kind of earth forces around me, but also it's where is my heart beating? What's making me feel like ooh versus you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like there's a lot that that we can start sensing about how our body responds. Some people, when things aren't good, their tummy goes, you know?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes when we realize that like that's a no answer, our body starts physically responding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but what happens is that when we're quiet, when we know how to quiet ourselves, then we can start being better listeners. And in my early practice, it was always my Reiki meditations that helped me let go of some of my anxiety and calm my nervous system down. And I felt it. Like even in the early beginnings, I didn't always feel what was happening during my self-treatment or when I was receiving Reiki from somebody else, but I knew that I felt more like myself. I knew that I felt calmer, that my mind wasn't so locked around an idea. I knew that because I'm a very like deep feeler. So sometimes I get really stuck in a lot of my emotions. And, you know, sometimes going for a walk helps me reset myself. Sometimes going and sitting with my tree friends helps me just kind of let myself rest and like come back to self. So Reiki is not the only way that we can do these practices, but it's a really great way. It's always been the fastest way for me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so it answers your questions. It gets you in the right mood, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody else may, you know, I get occasional acupuncture treatments.
Yeah.
And I've done yoga, I've done meditation. You know, it all plays a part. And sometimes I'll get away from those. You know, I'll go, well, no, you know, it doesn't mean that, you know, I meditate every day, but, you know, I don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know that if I'm, you know, in a certain place, that's where I got to go.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that we have learned over the years that we have alternatives, we have other options, and that's one of the biggest things to learn in life these days. Whether, you know, somebody who's, you know, I'm 78 years old, you know, so I'm still dealing with, you know, just my daily life and what, you know, the aging process presents to me.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it's the same as somebody who's 30 years old and they're looking for their first big job.
Sure.
Or they're looking to get married, or they're looking to do this, to take a partner, or you know, to take a pet, or whatever, you know, to make a life decision.
Yeah.
And like you say, it could be that small of a thing that turns the whole thing, you know, and just opens up, blossoms, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's interesting in that, you know, what we have the opportunity to learn as we go through life.
Yeah.
And the Pioneer Valley gives a lot of opportunities to let that, you know, flourish.
Yep.
So that's why it's interesting to say, you know, coming up without the title Pioneer Valley Life, you know, I had to come up with that title and say, what makes sense? Well, that makes sense to me, you know, and, you know, I talked to a variety of people about what it's like to live in the Pioneer Valley and experience life in the Pioneer Valley, because it is something special. I first came here in the 1960s.
Wow.
You know, so I've seen it go through a lot of changes over the years. I haven't been here the whole time, but I keep coming back.
Yeah.
I'm here now.
The vortex.
Yeah. And like I say, sometimes I go, well, you know, the winter comes along and I go, why am I doing that?
Yeah.
But anyway, so you and I also have something else in common, you know, other than sitting here on the stage, that we're both involved with Valley Free Radio.
Yes.
Which is, I just became involved maybe, 8 months ago. And it presented an opportunity to me that was tremendous, because I was a DJ many, many years ago, and I always liked it. And I went, oh, there's a low power station around here? Cool. So that's been a huge opportunity for me.
Yep.
And I know you had a program for a while, but now, you know, we're both on the board of directors. But so we're giving a plug to Valley Free Radio 103.3 FM. Streaming at valleyfreeradio.org.
That's right.
Which I say during my shows. You know, I just turned in my show today because I'm on Saturday mornings at 11.
Cool.
So anyway, we're almost out of time, so we've had a great conversation here. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having
you know, learning about what's happened in your life, but also, you know, the healing arts thing in general. You know, if somebody wants to learn more, they should just do it on their own. They can go to your website, which
Yep.
we'll put on the video,
Yep.
and they can just check things out. You know, you
Yep.
have so many options in
Yeah.
this area
Yep.
to, you know, health-wise, you know, so
You got it.
thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Peace.